Today I'm going to show you how to build a 4S lithium ion battery that looks kind of like this for your FPV drone. Let's go. So here's the deal. I'm just getting into FPV, but I've been into electric skateboards for the last 3 or 4 years. And one of the skills that I learned while being deep down into the rabbit hole of electric skateboards is how to build batteries. And the thing that has kind of kept me away from FPV for a long time has been the low flight times. Right? So electric skateboards, we build big ass batteries so we can go really fast and ride for hours on end. I've owned a DJI Spark that flew for 15 minutes or so. And I've got a Skydio which flies for about 20-ish minutes depending on how far I'm pushing it. So 6-minute flight time, maybe, depending on what kind of a LiPo battery, just doesn't seem long enough. So as soon as I started getting into FPV, I knew right away that I was going to want some longer flight times. How can I build a battery with my existing skill set? So I did look at some of the options on a couple of the different US suppliers and saw that most of them are really right around 4 to 6S. Okay, that's easy. And the number one battery that I saw around the internet there was a Molicel P42A. And in the e-skate world, this is a pretty decent battery as well. But with electric skateboards, because we are building such high voltage batteries with so many batteries in parallel, you don't always need a high amp output battery in order to create whatever it is you need. So for example, this Molicel P42 has 4 amp hours, 4,000 milliamps, mAh. Okay, let's call them amp hours or milliamps. It's so much easier. I think it just sounds ridiculous sometimes, but that's a different rant. Okay, so for electric skateboarding, you probably only need about 80 amps for your skateboard. So if you build something that's like 80 to 100, you have enough amp draw for the average person. So you could build a 12S 8P battery. I'm just going to ramble with all sorts of techno babble right now and put 8 cells in parallel to get your 80, or you have something that's a little bit higher. And if you have an overhead of amp output available to you, it's better for the life cycle of the battery. Unfortunately, this is going to be a 4S battery, a 4S 1 in parallel battery, which means the max output that you can get is whatever you're going to get from the cell, okay? Because we don't have the ability to link multiple together in parallel because it's going to be a heavy battery for a drone. So this is well rated at 45 amps, okay? So basically what we're going to be doing is just hot gluing these together. I am not going to solder these cells together because I have a spot welder, but the battery building method is what you want to take away so that you don't start a fire. Okay, so if you're new to batteries, right, and it looks like anything else you've had, like a AA, AAA, whatever, right, you've got the positive end of the battery here and you've got the negative. Now when it comes to lithium ion batteries, they are dangerous. This thing is like a firecracker, and if it doesn't blow your finger off, it'll definitely burn the shit out of it. Okay, so the negative end is the entire can all the way up into this area, even around here as well. And then this is the positive. Okay, so if you were to ever bridge the gap from the center to anywhere else on the can, you would cause a short circuit. And if that is prolonged and lasts for a long time, the battery ends up, sparking, catching fire, or blowing up like a firecracker maybe. So they do put a little cell protector here, or a little ring at the top just in case, and usually we put another one here on top of this. Okay, so when it comes to soldering, right, the scariest part would actually be soldering your wire to the positive part of the terminal here and just making sure that that hot iron doesn't melt through any of this or burn it and cause a spark. Okay, might not be the end of the world if you're quick, but it could happen. And so when you build batteries, right, it's positive to negative, positive to negative, positive to negative. Okay, like this. Maybe you've had like a really big flashlight that called for like 3C batteries or something like that, right? And so the more batteries you put in series, positive to negative, that's how you get more voltage. Okay, if you put the batteries right, this, and you connect them positive, 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 negative, 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 now we're creating or building a bigger battery that has more capacity, but the same amount of voltage. Okay, so this is a 4.2 volt battery when charged full with 45 amps of output. And if I did it like this, it would still be a 4.2 volt battery, but it would have 16 amp hours of capacity, or 16,000 milliamps. But as you add the amp output per battery like this, instead of 45, 90, you would actually have 135. Okay, so what's going to happen here? You only need 4 cells. And so it's going to be positive, negative, and we need it to be in a square form. So that means when we put this together, and I'll be showing you all of this, it's going to be 1 up, 1 down, 1 up, 1 down, and each one's going to be offset like this. Okay, so you need to decide what is going to be your main negative and which one will be your main positive, and that's going to depend on how you build this battery together. Okay, so it's going to have a little zigzag feature. So if this was my main negative, okay, it would come down here, and this is the positive side, and we'll talk about cell number 1, that is going to connect to this one. So it's going to come around, it's going to come back up, and then this one can now connect to that one, and then it goes down, and then it comes back, and so this would be the main positive. Now listen to the words that are coming out of my mouth.
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Okay, battery number 1. Battery number 1 is always where your main negative starts. Okay, you're going to mess this up. A 4S battery is not too big, but when you build like a 10 or a 12S battery, and you put the balance wires on, this is when you actually start to mess things up. Okay, it's happened to me multiple times, and eventually you learn it. Okay, so we're going to number the batteries, but number 1 is not the head of the battery. So let's just say these were positive, negative, in one big line. Okay, you would think that this, number 1's at the top. Wrong. Number 1 starts at the bottom. Okay, so as you go, it'll make sense. Okay, it's going to matter when we put the balance wires. So I was able to get some of these balance wires for like $6 off of Amazon. That's great, so that you can balance and still plug this into your B6 iMax charger, or whatever it is that you have to charge up your lipos, because you can pretty much charge them up to the same voltage. The balance cable is just nice because if one of these cells starts to hit 4.2 first, it'll cut the power to that one and balance the rest, so everything stays in sync and keeps it all harmonized. So let's hop into my workspace, otherwise known as my kitchen, because it's 30 degrees out right now, and let's build a battery. Okay, so as I said, I have a lot of battery building products already here from Building Escape Batteries. So if you have it, use it. If you don't, that's okay. But if you happen to have some different things like fish paper, which is really good for insulating in between the cells or wrapping it around the outside, protecting things from different elements or potential scraping or whatever, which could result in a battery, catching fire, falling apart, or something like that. So this is fish paper. I get this stuff off of AliExpress. This is 65 millimeter. Okay, so this is meant for 18650 cells, which are standard lithium-ion batteries. 18 meaning the width. Okay, so this is a 21700, so it's supposed to be 21 millimeters here and 70 millimeters in length. Yes, an 18650 would be 18 across and 65 in length, okay? So this is supposed to be 65 millimeters, which would be the same. It works enough for this 21700. And what you'd want to do is typically we like to insulate in between the cells when it's a positive and negative. So what I know is if I'm going to be making this battery, and you can do this with like duct tape if you want to, or like Gorilla Tape or whatever. Since I know I'm going to have a positive negative here and a positive negative here and both ways, what I'm actually going to do before I glue all of these is I'm just going to wrap 2 of the cells, like 2/3 of the way around the body, so that way these 2 parts that connect here and here are isolated from each other, and then the other 2 points over here, will be isolated from each other before I glue them all together, just as an extra level of precaution. So you could just put and it's just really a buffer, okay? I don't want to get into overly technical data and that kind of stuff, okay? And then on top of that, I do have heat shrink tubing. Got this thing, I want to say this is like 200 millimeter length. It's clear. I like to use clear because I like to be able to see the battery inside in case, you know, something catches fire or something smokes. I can kind of like visually see where I might need to attack if there's any issues, okay? There is also this, which is, this is polyamide tape, or what's the other name we call for this? It's like a high temp tape that you can put over the end of terminals, and if things get hot, it doesn't lose its the glue, the stickiness, right? So this is always good to have on hand. And then, like I said, a soldering iron. So if you're going to solder, right, you can do soldering. You're going to want silicone wire. Okay, you can get that off of Amazon for cheap, and you probably only need like 12 gauge wire, which will be more than enough. Okay, I have nickel that I'm going to use, and I'm going to spot weld it. So if you think that you're going to be building a lot of batteries, it might be worth investing in a spot welder. They're right around $150 to $200. But they will pay for themselves, especially for E-skate. I've definitely got my money out of that, right? In the first build of building a battery, it paid for itself, and then everything else has been profit, okay? So if you have a friend that has one, maybe you could borrow it. There's a little bit of a learning curve when it comes to it. Mine is okay. I could probably get a new one, but I'm starting to slow down on my battery making, so I'm just gonna do that. So, like I said, so the first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut a couple small snips of this, right, so that I can wrap 2/3 of 2 batteries right here, and then we'll glue it together, okay? Okay, so I got a couple small strips, as you can see, right? I already did 1 battery, and then I'm just putting this around, right? And this is really just a buffer. And I don't recommend working on a stainless steel table if you are new to battery building, but because it's a small battery and I know how to build batteries and nothing's gonna come off, right? Make sure you are operating on type of plastic or wood or something like that, just in case, so nothing connects and conducts, but the batteries alone by themselves are okay. So we're gonna do 1 positive, 1 negative, because eventually it's gonna come up like this, okay? Now when we get to the second part, right, we need to be careful, because I've messed this up before, so that way we get it right when we do the other one. So don't just assume that because you did it like this, that the next one is gonna work perfect like this, and then flip. It may not, but you might need to make a small adjustment to offset for how we glue it. So we'll look at that here in a second, right? But basically, I'm going to glue right down the strip here, and then that'll leave enough on the other side for when I glue to the other side over there too, okay? So sometimes you might want to have like something that you can push up against you to make sure they're perfectly flush. I will be okay when I do that, and a glue gun is your friend right here. So I'm just gonna run a nice little strip, and we're just gonna get it to stick together to start, right? So I get it lined up, push it together. Okay, like that, and then I'll just let that cool for a second. But you know, hot glue basically comes together really quickly, okay? So that means if it's positive, negative, this side's gonna be positive, negative over here, okay? So that means, let's just kind of visually set this up. So this one's gonna be a negative over here. This one's gonna be a positive up here, but I wanna make sure that this next set that I glue, right, is more to this side up here, so that way when I glue it here, the paper goes between all 4 of these. Does this make sense? Okay, so what I'm gonna do this time is now I'm just gonna run a strip down this one. Doesn't really matter which one you put glue on. Yep, and then now I'm going to glue it and get a little bit of the fish paper here. And get them lined up. Okay, so, right, and that's gonna cool for just a second. So now when I put it together, right, now I'm insulated between these 2 pieces right here, because this positive and this positive, I mean, it doesn't really which one you're gonna call positive, doesn't matter, right? They'll come together and they will glue like this, and I just wanna make sure that when I do these 2 together right here, that I get it to be stacked nice and perfect, instead of it slipping like this, or even being like slightly off. So I'm just gonna try and be a little more careful with that as I stack this final one. So this time, now, once again, I'm just gonna need a nice little strip down here right on the top, and right on the top. Good, yes, and then I'm gonna lay this one right on top, and I'm just gonna eyeball it. Boom, a little more to the right, sure, great, good, yep, boom. Look, and it's a little off, like by a millimeter. I can see it, I don't know if you can. Okay, but they're both flat, they're both pretty close, okay? So now we've got our batteries glued together, and then I'm gonna come back and fill this in right here, right, just with a little bit more. Actually, I need another glue stick, here we go. Make sure you have plenty of glue, okay? And I'll just fill that in. Now some people use this black, like, high temp silicone glue, and they're like, you got to use that because eventually when it's like hot summer days, like I've never had any issues, and it's all going to be taped together anyways at the end, right? And then it's going to be stuck together in shrink wrap, right? So I'm just going to fill in the gaps here so that there's a little more stick between all of this stuff here. Right, and if you have, this is like a smaller glue gun, if you can splurge on the slightly bigger one that uses slightly bigger sticks, it stays hotter longer between pushes, but this was the one that I had since I got things started, okay? So I'm gonna let that cool for a second, and then we'll come back and we'll start to number the cells and kind of look at the flow. Okay, so we're going to number the cells. I mean, it's just 4S, but it's always good habit to number how everything's going to go. Okay, doesn't matter which one is 1 and which one is 4. Doesn't eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Okay, but number 1, right, as we said, will always be your main negative battery terminal. Okay, cell group 1, and then everything leads to the top there. Okay, so it's just going to be 1 over to this one, 2, right, and then this one will jump here. 3, and then 4. Okay, very simple. And if you want to put like a little positive, negative over, you could, and then right, it's going to alternate back and forth, maybe, so you get a bit of visual representation of how this works. Okay, batteries, they're not like scary. It's kind of like having a knife or a gun. You just got to respect the tool for what it is. Okay, so that means, okay, this is going to be my main negative. This is number 1, 2, 3, and 4. So this is going to be my main negative, and by the time we're done, this will be the main positive. So you need to be very careful, even though they're next door neighbors. Once everything is connected is when you have a dangerous battery, okay? So what you never want to do is have these two connect, because that will create a spark, and if that stays there forever, the battery starts to blow up. But not to scare you. Okay, so number 1 will come down here, and we're going to connect this positive to this negative. Yes, and then it'll come up. Here's the positive number 2 that will connect to the negative of number 3. Yes, and then that goes down, and then the positive of number 3 connects to the negative of number 4, and this is your main positive lead right here. Okay, and that's how we get our 4S battery, or what is that, like 16 volts when it's fully charged. Okay, so we've got this. This is good. I'm going to put a couple ring protectors on top just in case, since I have them. And so they look like these. You can get these on eBay. Sometimes you can get them on Amazon. These are meant for an 18650 cell, so they are a little bit smaller than they should be, but I'm going to just put them there anyways. And actually what I usually do is, since I'm going to be connecting 1 to 2, I'll put it here over the top, right? Because remember, this is the positive. Everything else is a negative, right? I'll put it like here, but I'm going to offset it a little closer to the number 2, right? Because I'm going to go this way. So that way, if the nickel happens to rub through or something, it's just an extra layer. There is another. You can see this black one under here already. They do come with one, but we always like to put an extra one just in case. So 1 to 2, 2 to 3, yes. And so I'll take these and I'll just go around, right? And if you don't have these, it's okay if you don't, right? You could maybe like get creative and put a little piece of duct tape, like, or something heavy here in between these 2 points, right? Just as like your bit of added security, okay? But we'll skip to the end on this. Okay, so we're done, right? We've got just some like little ring protectors here. And now I'm gonna start getting the nickel ready. Okay, like I said, you don't have to have nickel. You could solder from these 2 points just using some 12 gauge wire, right? For me, the scariest part, or the thing you'd want to be most cautious about, would be just getting it to solder and not bridge any gaps or melt through anything here on the positive side. You have tons of real estate over here on the negative side, and what I like to do is I like to use a little bit of sandpaper just to create a couple scratches right there. That way when you solder and you put the solder on there, it has something to adhere to. Okay, so you would want to prime it with just a little bit of solder, and you'll add it to the wire, okay, and then get this one nice and legit, right? And you're going to want your wire, the exposed wire, just to be a small little nub that's going to fit perfectly right there on the pad, and no solder will go spilling over. And then over here, you'll have plenty of space to make this happen. But since I am using nickel, yes, I'm just going to start to cut a few pieces, right? I don't really need a whole lot, obviously, because this is a small battery. And I'm going to show you just like how I gauge and get it in the general length, and then I'm going to come back and trim everything up, right? So I know that it needs to be at most by here on this edge, right? And I'm going to round off the corners, right? So maybe something like this is good, right? Because if there's any extra, I've got tons on the negative side, yeah? And so I'm gonna need, how many pieces am I gonna need? I'm gonna need 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 pieces, yeah? So let's see, 1 to 2, 1, 2, 3, and 4. I think 4 pieces is what I need. And I'm gonna cut a couple extra because what I like to do is have some pieces over the edge for the terminals. So this is, what is this? This is 8 to 10 millimeter width. This is supposed to be real. What is it supposed to be? Nickel? Yeah. So that it doesn't rust. So you have to give it a test sometimes. But what you want to do is once I get it, right, and I'm going to look at my numbers, which make things easier, right? So this is my 1, which connects to my 2 over here, okay? My 1 connects to my number 2, positive 1 to negative 2, okay? So this will fit, but you don't want any sharp edges because that's how sparks and issues come about, okay? So I'm going to take this and I'm going to take my nice little scissors, and they're not like special sharp. They're just basic, like, you know, sewing scissors or whatever. I'm going to round off the edges and try to make sure that there's no like extra pointy bits. Yeah. And so now you can see it's maybe there's a little bit of a point right there. Right. And you can kind of get it just right. Boop. Like that's nice. Yeah. Cool. And then just be like, boom. Okay, great. Is that the right size? Yeah. Look, that's perfect. Look at the way it fits. You see? Okay. So from that 1 to 2, and I'm going to have a little extra. So by the time I round off this edge, you don't really have to worry so much about the negative side as much. Yes, because like I said, the whole body of the can is negative. Okay, and we're only doing just a 1 series battery, right? So then you've got this. Great. So now once I get done connecting number 1 to number 2, if we were to check the voltage from this side to that side, it would go from, right now these are resting at 3.5 volts, so you usually get them from the battery factory at 3.5, 3.6 roughly. So that would be a 7-volt battery, and then, right, and then it's 10, and then it's 14, okay? So now let's look at the spot welder. Let me set that up. Okay, so I have this, it's called the Boss spot welder. It was like 100 and something bucks, 120 from Korea. It works. Is it epic? No. Is it okay? I don't know if part of it was the fact that I bought not like a graphene. It can only handle a 3S battery. This one has worked. This battery is almost toast, but it gets the job done. But you can turn it on. Right, it does a little beep up sequence and stuff like that. And once the probes start to get like warm, it actually welds a lot better. But I do have to use a really high value, like 15 millisecond welding, okay, for it to get really solid welds. So that I don't like. And there's a bunch of other things here. But this thing will it gets the job done, okay? So basically it's meant to auto fire, and I have it set at, I don't even know, a 2-second delay. So as soon as both of these probes, right, ground, right, it'll notice that, then it'll weld 2 seconds later. So for me, I like to start off slowly. Okay, I always like to start off on the negative side, but I want to get things lined up. So hopefully you can see this. Yes, and then I've got my 2 probes, and I'm going to put it here. See? And look, those are 2 shit welds, okay? Garbage. That is not good, okay? So, and like I said, when it starts to get warmed up, it actually does better spot welds. I'm not sure why. So it takes a little bit of time for me to get some things going. It'll stick right now, but I could actually peel this off and it won't leave anything behind. That is bad. That is bad welding. So you want to start to get to a point where it starts to stick, right? I'll take this for now while the probes are starting to warm up, and then we'll see what happens here. And then as we start to find our stride, right, it'll start to weld better. I might have to turn it up to 16 and we'll see. But the problem is the longer the millisecond, the more heat it kicks out. So that's why you want to try and keep the amount of heat transfer down as much as possible, okay? Which is why soldering can be risky, because you're using high heat and you need to be very quick on and off, okay? Especially when you're spot welding to this part of the battery, you want to make sure that you are going to hit anywhere on the pad. If you were to be over some dead space or something like that, there's potential for a bigger spark. And if you were to spot weld to the sidewall here, then you would eventually be grounding this battery to itself, because this is here. So you want to be careful with that. It takes a little bit of practice to kind of get it nailed out right here. keep moving around. Come on, get nice and hot. Let's get to work. Right, so we're starting to get a little more burn action, right? But we're not melting through, which is nice. It's kind of almost there. And you're supposed to really hit it at an angle and try to like keep the probes nice. But like I said, I've done a lot of batteries with this spot welder, so it's definitely time for something new. But like I said, I'm slowing down. So, right, so in a perfect world, you would get 3 welds in a nice little row. And this is actually a little bit hot to the touch. 1, 2, 3, and it'd be perfect. But because I have to warm it up and it kind of sucks sometimes, right? And then I like to come back and like test with my finger and go. Yeah, so I'll probably put a couple more here. So with that being said, now I'm just going to jump ahead. I'm going to do the same thing, right? Number 1 positive goes to the negative number 2. Positive of number 2 goes to the negative of number 3. If I were to connect these 2 batteries, top and bottom, that would be bad, okay? So that's why you want to number and just take it really slow, okay? And I always like, if I'm ever uncertain, I'm not going to do it, but I always kind of like give a little tap like this, even though I'm like this, just to make sure that I'm not creating a short circuit, because it would spark really easily and I can take it away. Yeah, so I'm just going to jump to the end when I get done going around, but you'll see. Okay, so we got this done. I'm not 100% done yet, but I want to show you. So we got some okay welds here, right? So where did we start? 1 to 2, it was okay, right? 2 to 3, it started to get a little bit hotter. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, so I've got some good welds. Some other people would say otherwise. And 3 to 4, right? We started to get a little bit of heat. It's burning a little bit, but you know what? They're going to be solid welds. They're not going to come up, okay? So you should always have a multimeter just to check. Remember, this is our positive, negative, and our positive, or positive, negative, our main negative terminal, our main positive terminal. And if these 2 were to ever come into contact, that would be a major sparking issue. Same thing with all of these. Like if these were ever to connect for one reason or another, eventually one of these 2 might spark, right? Especially this one. So notice how they're kind of together, but over here, these 2 are connected. Yes, 1 and 2. So that would create a short. So you can always take your multimeter, and if you don't have one, these are super cheap at Walmart, and we're going to put it to 20 volts. Okay, you're just going to have to trust me. I'll point it here towards the camera. Maybe you'll catch it. Okay, so I already know that this works, but okay, so black is negative, red is positive, and if I put the 2 probes here, we're getting 14.17 volts, which is great. But if you ever were making a bigger battery or you wanted to check between 1 and 2, right, remember, so if we took the negative of number 1, right, and we put it on the positive of number 2, we should get 7 volts, which is right. Remember I said that the cells are usually about 3.5 volts each. So if I did from 1 to the positive of number 3, which is right here, you can do the math, right? That would be, what, 10, right? Something like that. Yeah, 10.63, okay? So we are here, we are set, okay? And what I'm gonna do now is I'm actually gonna wrap this whole thing, okay, with the fish paper, right? And then I'm going to take a little bit more of the nickel, and I'm going to take some of it. I'm going to create like a main lead terminal. So I don't want my main the wires to come off right off the top. So I'm going to put something like this and then bend it down so that I can kind of put a negative here and it comes out a little bit nicer. Now, some people would argue and say that, well, the amp carrying capacity of this piece of nickel can't really carry the 45 amps. It would actually be coming out of here and blah, blah, blah. And this is close enough, okay? Because you're not going to be doing 45 amps constantly, right? It'll probably only be like 10 to 15 at best. I don't have no idea, but I'm going to guesstimate for an FPV. And occasionally you'll be punching and getting the max ampacity, geez, that's a tongue twister, ampacity out of the battery. And yeah, would that hypothetically heat up this and then reduce the amount of transference of voltage and all this other stuff? Yes. So you could double stack it if you really wanted to, but if you're soldering, you're going to be soldering anyways 12 gauge wire right to the very end anyways, so you don't have to worry about that because 12 gauge can actually carry a lot of ampacity. So if you're spot welding like I am, whatever, man. Okay? All right, I'll see you in the next little bit. So I wrapped this up with the fish paper, and I wanted to share one thing with you, and I actually made one mistake too, a small mistake. So you notice there's a gap in the center. So remember when I told you when I bought this fish paper that this was for 18650 cells, and these are 21700s, which means that this paper would never be long enough top to bottom. So I just cut it in the center and just molded it around. Now here's the mistake that I made, is that as I measured and I went around, I was like, oh, I just need this much. And I put a little bit of extra for overlap. But what I like to do is when I wrap, I like to contour with the cell. That way, when we put the balance wires on, I can run them up the side of the battery and they will sit recessed in this groove instead of up top. That just prevents any rubbing that might actually occur while it's on the drone or whatever. It's just kind of recessed within the side of the battery, and it's just like preventative. Now for this middle part, it's not important. I am going to put a little bit of the tape here just to gap that. But if you don't have the fish paper, like I said, once again, you might be using just duct tape. You might be using one of those like fiberglass reinforced tapes or something like that too. Just some layers of insulation. And then we will, after we solder on the balance wires, then we'll come back. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of tape here. I'm going to put an extra string up around here because I know that these two are going to be, right, my main negative and the main positive. It's going to have the nickel that's going to fold over right here. So I'm just going to put some extra layers of insulation there just in case there's any movement, and then I will tack those two pieces on. Okay, so we're about to start soldering now. So I got the last little piece right here, this little terminal piece that I've got. And you notice that I put a little piece of blue tape just to be preventative, make sure that nothing ever bridges, right? Now, obviously, it's going to be more secure, but these are the two parts that are important. So we're going to look at soldering a couple different things, right? We want to put the balance leads on. So I got these off of Amazon. Like I said, I'll put a link if you really want them. Okay, so that you can plug it into your iMax-B charger or the LiPo Pro, which looks like this right here, right? And then you plug it in. When you plug it in, yes, and then it clips to the terminals, okay? So we'll be able to balance everything. So the red wire is going to go to your main lead, and then the negative, the one on the far side, is going to be your negative, okay? So this is going to go to the positive of cell number 1, positive of cell number 2, positive of number cell 3, number 4, number 3, sorry, I can't talk, positive battery negative, 1, 2, 3, and then this is the main lead, which goes here, okay? So I'm going to solder these on. What I'm actually going to do first are the main leads first, okay? So the XT60, right? So I've got tons that I'm going to salvage, right, that I never throw away. So I'm going to salvage this and resolder. Pro tip is when you're soldering to one of these, whether it's the positive or not the positive, the male or the female, put them together because the heat that comes off of this can sometimes loosen the bullet pieces in here, and this will keep it from melting through and kind of shifting all over the place, okay? So as I detach these, I'm going to solder on some new ones, and I'll do that with you. I'll record it here shortly. Okay, so I got the old wires out first, and now I'm going to tin these and put these in, okay? So if you don't know this and you haven't looked at an XT60, it'll tell you which side is positive, which side is negative, so you can just pick one. And then once I tin this, I'm going to attach it. If you don't have something sticky, some people have, like, I don't know, special putty that works. I just like to use heavy tools, yeah, like this vice clamp or whatever, to weigh it down so it doesn't move when I start to solder the wire on. Or you can also use the vice clamp to like hold it, so it's a little bit of a holder, okay, if you don't want to like spend more money on little grips, okay? So it's up to you, right? It's kind of making it move, and it's a little bit high, but I have a nice hot iron. This thing is okay. It's probably time for something nicer. This was like a cheap introductory kit that I got off of Amazon a few years back. It served me well, but it's definitely time for a new one. So I'm going to start with the side closest to me because that makes sense, right, which is negative. So I've got that way down here. I know it's not the best view, but you get the idea. So I'm just going to start over here on this side, and I just like to get my solder out, and it's almost time for a little bit more. Okay, so this is some good solder. Lead-free Flux 2.0. Yeah, get this really hot. You can feel the wire starting to mush down. I'll move it a little closer so you can see it. And then I start to put it into the wire. And sometimes when you start to, if you melt and you get it right in there, it'll go in a little bit quicker. Okay, and then I'll get it on one side. And it started to go through and around. A little more. And when you feel the wire kind of squishing underneath, you can tell that the solder is going in, okay? And it can be a little bit hot at times, okay? But I have just a little bit. So I'm gonna come over here now, and I've got it kind of set into the little groove. And you wanna get it while it's hot because it's easier, yeah? And I'm gonna melt it back down and get it super hot so that that solder melts into the connector part of the XT60 right here. Good. And we'll see if that sticks. And I think it did. Okay. So that's the first one. Okay. And this wire is really thick for an XT60, so sometimes it doesn't go in all the way. And so it's still a little bit dirty here on the side. So I'm going to clean that up in a second. But first, I want to make sure, right, everything's really hot, so be careful, yeah, that I can really pull, yeah, and it's not going to come out, right? That's how I know I got a good solder, okay? So that works. And then now that I got that, I can come back and kind of just mush some of these wires a little bit closer to this. It's okay, I'm going to put heat shrink on it anyways, but you know, when you use like a thick wire like a 12 gauge or even a 10 gauge on an XT60, there's just going to be some extra hanging over, okay? So we've got the negative done, now we can do the positive. So if I were to flip this, because this is the side I want to, this one is up. But the nice thing is that these rotate, okay? So what you can do, and because these are all hot, I'm going to rotate it. So I can just turn this pin over so that it faces up for me. Yeah? Cool. All right, let's do the next one. Okay, so I got this one nice and hot. It's ready to go. I'm going to have a little less working space here, but I'll make it work. Get it set on top. All right, work with it while it's hot. Get it mushed in there really nice so that all the solder connects to the little bullet piece of it. Yep, like so. Give it a second to cool down. All right, but that looks decent. Not the most epic, not the most beautiful, but I promise these things ain't coming apart. Okay. Let's see how it is. Good. Okay. So that looks good. And then all I need to do now is I want to cut it to length. Okay. So how much wire do I need, right, for it to connect to the drone? Okay, so for me, since I already have a LiPo, I'm gonna go measure and use that as a little bit of a guide, okay? But you can eyeball it. I mean, it's better to have a little more than too little. And with this thicker wire, it's a little less flimsy, so it's not gonna move around in the air as much as these need to be a little more accurate, okay? Okay, so before we can move on to the next step, we need to insulate this, right, with heat shrink, okay? So I've got a couple pieces right here. You can actually get one of these kits right here off of Amazon for like, I don't know, under 10 bucks. I highly recommend it if you're gonna work with electronics. Okay, it comes with all the different sizes. It's lasted me like 4 years, and I've only had to reorder these particular sizes, the one you use a lot. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, and you should always have a heat gun. They're just so much, they're worth it, man. They are just so much better than using a lighter, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put this over it, and there is a little bit of a technique because if you look here, there's not a whole lot of space around the base, okay? So as I do this, I'm gonna heat up the heat shrink closer to the end so that I can kind of like flute it, I guess, or taper it, or whatever it is you want to say, so that as it shrinks, instead of it just shrinking right here, I need to get this part to shrink first so that I can kind of get it into that little recession, so that way it's as insulated as magically possible. Okay, so put it on low. These things get hot really quick, super easy to work with. Yeah. And I'm just going to go up here at an angle, and you'll see it's going to start to shrink really quick, especially right here. Yeah. And there's this one, so the red one's shrinking quicker, so I want to try and get it into the hole. That's nice. I could use a little bit more. Okay. Because I don't want it to shrink and leave open space, right? I want it to be in there. It's almost there. I could use my nail maybe a teeny bit. Yeah, a little bit more. Boom, boom, boom. Bing bong, right? Get it in there, push it down. That looks pretty good. Yeah. And then I can start to slowly shrink. But I don't want to just pretend like I got it. I want to make sure that I'm actually going to get it in there as best as possible. They do sell some of the XT60s now. They come with a little clip-on cap, kind of like the XT90s have, which is a super nice feature. Yeah, and then I'll just melt the rest here and get it super shrunk. So worth it. So much better than a lighter. Yeah. So look, like now, right, we're in really good shape. Okay, so that's snug, right? There's nothing sticking out at the bottom like a gap. This looks good. So now we can move on to the next part, and now we can actually solder this to the battery, and then we'll wrap up with the balance leads. Okay, so now we're ready to solder to the battery. So we need to be careful and we need to be quick because we don't want too much heat to transfer into the battery because it's bad for them. Also, even though this is like heat resistant tape, I'm trying not to put too much solder on it. And like I said, I also like to scratch with a little bit of a sandpaper so that the solder has something to stick to. So I did that. I put a little bit here. Did it on the other one. I started to do it for the balance wires. We'll talk about that when we get there. And remember, I'm keeping this on here just for safety. So we're going to start with the positive first. And what I'm going to do is I'll have this back here, I guess. And so we're going to do the positive first. It's going to be like this, yes? So I can just bend this one kind of out of the way so I have more working space. I mean, it doesn't really matter if these two touch one side because, right, nothing's coming together. So you don't need to worry there. So the same thing, I'm going to tin this thing down first. Get it all nice and, you know, molten, hot. Yeah, boom. It'll take a minute, but I got this thing running really hot. Hotter than it should be for this thing, but like I said, this is not like a high quality soldering iron, okay? And so what I'm gonna do, I'm right-handed, yes? So while this is hot, I'll leave it there for a second because I can come back. I'm just gonna get a little bit. There's a nice little dollop right there, okay? So look, it needs to be like this so I can set the second one up, right? So boom, get this bad boy really hot and melty. Take it back up here. Give it a second, blow on it. Try to get all that heat transferred out. Save the batteries. Yep. Boom, and then that's good. Yeah. Use your mouth. Yes? Okay, cool. So now we're ready to do the next one. And now you could, you know, put the battery up against something, right? I could do this over here. I have a little bit of space, so I'm going to be able to put this down here, right, for number 1 and 2, and maybe I'll roll the battery around, right? I try to minimize the amount of tugging I have because I don't want it to pull my nickel off that's been spot welded, but if you're already soldering, it's not really going to matter. This is really just if you're trying to do a solder job like I am. Well, solder and spot weld. Yeah, since I need this to roll with this, so I can come and tin this side over here. Ooh, look at that. You hear it? It's nice and hot. Boom. Okay. So now I can take this one and I can take this off. And maybe what I'll do just for, because I like to be safe, is I'll put the blue over here. I'll lift this one up. Get a little chunk of solder on there. Yep, and then come back and reheat this bad boy down here. Bring them back up. Woo, that's hot, I can feel it. Sometimes it's good to have pliers. Yeah, that's good. Super hot, and it probably wouldn't be a bad idea for me to put some blue tape on the bottom just in case there is some speck of, you know, metal down here, you know, not a bad idea to do that. Okay, so good. So now we've got this. This is solid. Yep, and I'm just gonna bend that down for now until we get to the other pieces. Yes, I'll just wrap this over like this, or even kind of like that, just to make sure that, you know, nothing falls on this over here. Okay, so now we're ready to start doing some balance wires, okay? You know what? This is a great learning experience. Look at this. I just fucked up, okay? Look at the way my wire is facing. Now you might be like, what's wrong with that? There's not enough lead coming off of this to actually connect to the power cord when we're in the drone, okay? So I messed up, okay? Which happens, yes? I need to flip this so that the wires are pointing this direction so I have all of this usable wire. No biggie. Now I just get to undo my work and do it one more time, yes? So look, accidents happen. I'm actually showing you in real time, whatever, okay? I ain't got no pride to hide, okay? So look. I'm going to melt it back off, keep it hot. There's one. Now I want to be very careful because when I come for the other side, right, I don't want to like bridge, you know, or ground it on itself. So I'm going to be careful over here. Boom, off. Great. Good job, Brandon. Okay, so now here we are. Back again. Parliament, Big Ben. Then I'm just going to reverse this. It happens. Accidents happen. Ooh, it's hot. I can feel it on my finger. Okay, right? So there's one. Blow to dissipate the heat. Not because it's only because it's hot here, but because I don't want it to go into the cell. Come on. There we go. It happens. Right, and then same thing over here. Get hot and melty. You're burning my finger. Ah, chef hands. Great. Look, now we're back. Now you got to see it twice. But do you see it's important to have a really hot iron so that way I can do that and get it on and off in just a few seconds instead of it taking a minute, okay? But look, so we've got our one, and if you didn't notice this, I came back and I relabeled everything because it's always good practice just to make sure, yes. And we want to make sure that right, we're getting our power, which we should be, makes sense, right? But to verify with the multimeter, put this over here, turn this down towards you, okay, so you can see, yes. So obviously at the terminals, we've already tested it, so we know that this is the positive, this is the negative. Boom, we're at 1419. And then if I come up here inside of the connector, same reading, yeah, great. Okay, cool. Okay, so now we're ready to add the balanced lead wires. And here's the pro tip. Here's the thing that I learned last time. Okay, so remember, we said that this is the main positive, which is going to go here. And the one on the opposite side is going to be the main negative. Right, so you might think that I might start with one of these. Okay, but since this is in theory the top of the battery, right, instead of starting with the main negative, I'm actually going to start with number 1, okay? And the reason for that is once I get this one soldered down here, I know exactly how long this thing can be because that's all the slack that there is. And then I can trim these other wires to the perfect length for up here. Okay, so what I did with the last battery is I just said, screw it, whatever. I'll just put them in the slack. But the extra slack from the wires that are at the top, I don't like their ability or how flimsy they are, and I feel like they could get caught in the props. Okay, so I want to cut everything to the perfect length. So instead of starting with the battery negative, I'm going to start with 1. Now here's where it gets interesting. Okay, so this is the positive terminal where it should be soldered to for number 1, but also number 1 is connected to the negative of number 2. So I could solder that wire anywhere here if I want to. So what I'm going to do is actually solder it closer to the negative terminal because I have so much dead space over here, and you can't really go wrong on the negative side of the battery. If I go right here over the lip, what happens if I get it too hot and then it melts through the plastic? Want this to wobble or anything, so I'm just going to come in here with a layer of my tape, whatever tape it is you have. All right, get underneath. Boom, I'm going to tape the black side down first. It doesn't really matter which side you do, but I just want to tape it to prevent any movement that it might have. Okay, before giving it like a super final insulation. Right, and then I might come over here at the same thing for the red one. Right, press down so that that piece of nickel doesn't move, right? and then tape it and come over here. So that's good, right? Get everything nice and secure. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut one more slice of this over here and put this on as a little cover, right? That'll go on top of that to prevent any chafing or rubbing or anything. But this will always face up on the drone, and this will face towards the back, right, for plugging in. So I'm going to cut another slice off like this just to cover it, one more layer of protection. Okay, and then we'll look at the bottom here. So I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to take the tape and tape over it, and I'll probably just use this little piece of this plastic container that I have. And I have some thicker tape here, so this will only need less. I'm just going to throw a couple pieces over, right? Like I said, you guys might be using regular Gorilla tape, Gorilla Glue, duct tape, a fiber reinforced tape, you know, whatever's working for you. Boom, and I'll take that. That might be like one cut. Okay, and then I can do a second one over here. Da, 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 da. Yes, I'll take this, and this one will go over, and I'm going to try and tape it so that it'll hold this balance wire in place a little bit right now too, because we'll come back around for those. And same deal for this guy. Yeah, and then tape over the ends. There's a little bit extra. All right, boom, boom, boom. Help that. Right, it's nothing magical, right? Okay, so this end is taped and safe. So then now I can come back once again and put a sliver of this that'll cover both ends and wrap over the sides. So let's just say, I'll try something like this. It feels like really thick cardboard stock, right? Maybe something that you had when you were a kid in elementary school, right? So go like this, and then I put it over the edge, nice and even Steven. Yeah, you can see like this. Yeah, and this is kind of what it looks like from this bottom view. All right, so that I can just roll it over the edge, and any rounded parts here I can kind of just soften up with my fingers and hands. Yeah, because we're gonna put shrink wrap. That's the only thing that you really should buy is the shrink wrap. You don't have to, but I recommend it. Okay, and then we're going to do the exact same thing with the top. I just got to be a little more sneaky with the tape and getting it through the wires, and then I will figure out how to get the fish paper in between there too. Okay, we're pretty much there. This actually looks really good. Okay, so I've got this thing all encapsulated and as safe as possible, right? We put a little bit of conformal coating. I don't like having this gap right here, even though most of the shrink wrap is going to be here. So if you wanted to, and I'm going to, what I'm going to do is just fill this in with a little bit of hot glue and kind of like fill it in, make it kind of like waterproof. You could use silicone or something, but what I like about hot glue is that it comes undone easily. So you can like pull the chunk out if you ever need to go back in and save the battery. So I'm gonna fill this in with hot glue, and then we're going to shrink wrap it, and we're done. All right, we're in the home stretch, boys and girls. Okay, so I've got this clear shrink wrap. Like I said, I think it's 200 millimeter. It's usually, when I'm building a big battery, a 12S battery, what you build is two halves that are 6S, and then you connect them kind of like what we did. So you build two small batteries, smaller. So typically, right, this would actually fit for 21-700s in a long slide like this, or 18-650s. But for this little pack, it's going to be perfect for this too. So I'm going to put it like this, okay, so that this way, right, this part comes out. And you want to have a little extra. Once you get in here, come on. Yeah. So you want to have a little extra so that as it shrinks, you can fold it in. Okay, so this should be enough. It's going to tighten up really nicely. Yes, and then I'll be able to fold some of this over. So I might have cut a little too much, but we'll see what happens as we start to shrink it. Yeah, so we'll get the gun out. This is usually the fun part. And we just start heating it up. This is where the heat gun comes in handy. Okay, because you ain't doing this with a lighter, I promise you. And this should shrink by half pretty much. And usually when it's done shrinking, it totally relaxes too. Like it'll just kind of get super smooth, and then we'll be able to form it, yeah? So look, nice and tight, holds everything together, tight like a tiger. Okay, all right, so this is as much as it's gonna shrink here. And the same thing down here on the bottom, it's not gonna shrink anymore, okay? So maybe I'll just go boom, 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 boom. Yeah, like that. Let it cool for a second. See where it's at, right? And it'll kind of like solidify. Maybe it'll loosen it up a little bit. If you mess up, you could always come back with some heat. Yeah, like that. I recommend putting on gloves like it's winter time right now. So if you just put on like a light pair of liners, right? It's not too hot to handle. And you can kind of move these around right here. But I'm just going to go really quick, yeah? But, look at the bottom, right? Now it's like sealed really good. This is actually, that's a good idea. So put a little extra at the bottom so you can seal it. But what are we gonna do up here about the top? So I'm gonna loosen this up and I'm gonna kind of fold everything together. And then obviously I don't want to move these or push these. I want to have some space to come out, but I'll mold it, yeah? Just soften it. The plastic, like I said, once it gets warm, right, it's really easy. Boom, like this. You can kind of fold it. Make sure the wires are kind of just over here. Yeah, something like this. And this is pretty good, right? Like, it only takes just a teeny bit, like that. Yep, that's good. I'm happy with that. That's great, right? And it's pretty much waterproof, right? Because if you think about it, like this is going to be the front part of the drone, right? And you fly your drone facing forward. So if there was any water coming off of it at a high speed, hopefully it would get wicked off. And that, my friends, is how you build a lithium-ion battery for your FPV drone. Now, the only question left is, how much time do I get to fly? And the answer to that question is, I don't know. Why? Because my DJI FPV controller died after the third time and I just sent it off for repair now. You can probably watch that video right up here and I'll link it. But if you have any questions on making these, hopefully that was probably the most intensive long video that I've ever made willingly. Yeah, so hopefully you enjoyed it. Give it a share, link it up. And hopefully I'll get my controller back in the next couple of weeks and then I can take these bad boys out for a flight. All you need to do now is charge them up and you're good to go. Now, at the cost, I feel like they're like 40, 50 bucks if you were to buy one of these already made. So the cells only cost me, I want to say $16, maybe $20. Yeah, so if you invest some money and you think you're going to make a lot of batteries and you need them for your drones, it might be worthy investment to get a spot welder, or you could just solder on top and be quick. If I did soldering, this probably would have been done maybe in less than 30 minutes quicker or something like that, yeah? So keep that in mind. This is Life of Acro. I'm Acro Brandon, and this is my life, and hopefully that helps. I'll see you all in another video.